Recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Micah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I guess look around, I end up being the most senior member of this panel, and having seen a number of scandals and also participated in various investigations. I don't think I've ever seen any investigation or review by this committee or subject that has so riveted and shocked the American people. Going home last weekend, almost to a person, everyone asked me about this. Maybe it's because what Mr. Cummings said, you know, people expect truth and trust in government. Everyone, just about everyone that I deal with or talk to pays taxes or has to deal with IRS. So this has really come home to them in a very personal way. They want us to get to the bottom of this. And Mr. George, you know, so far IRS would have us believe that this is a bunch of lower-level IRS employees who got around the water cooler one day in Cincinnati and said, who do we target this week? And they sort of got out of hand, and that's the end of the story. Do you think that's the end of the story?
I do not, Congressman.
You do not. And neither do the American people. What's disturbing, too, is I made this little chart this morning. Sort of the pattern. This isn't very fancy. The staff not highly paid graphics here, but you know, this all started back in 2010. And here's a long list, Mr. Shulman, of members of Congress who contacted you, and I see Sarah Hall Ingram, I see Lerner, on and on. Not just people like Mr. Eisen and myself of this committee, but senators and everyone else asking questions here, all the way through. And for 27 months, you said you did all you could to expedite those requests. For 27 months from here to here, nothing got done. None of those were approved, were they? Not one. Not one.
I defer to Mr. George, who's
I'm
looked
just
into
telling
the
you,
details.
we checked 27 months, none. So what you're saying it doesn't hold truth. The thing, too, and you may disagree with the Tea Party or conservative groups, so whether you're liberal or conservative, Americans under the right of this little document, the Constitution, you know, maybe not in the framework of the Constitution, but right at the beginning, we have 10 amendments. The Founding Fathers, to pass it, put in there, the first is the freedom of speech. You closed down or gagged for 27 months people, or folks who work for IRS, closed them down for 27 months between 2010. We were discussing policies of expanding government, of health care important to the American people, of a whole host of issues, plus the election coming up. For 27 months, you gagged or closed down the legitimate right of those folks to participate in the process under the Constitution. Do you disagree with that?
Let me premise that I was, because on purpose, I was not heavily involved in.
Okay.
Let me finish. In tax-exempt organizations, but my best understanding is people were not closed down during this time. No. My best understanding, though, is that people were operating at that time, and there's also, my best understanding is there's a whole other option for someone to be a 501c4.
Did you know, Mr. Miller,
they don't need to apply.
Did you know Mr. Miller had sent or had you sent approve of sending Ms. Lerner down to look at this?
Mr. Miller informed me sometime in the spring that he was going to look into the matter further and find out what was going on down in the
But did you know Ms. Lerner was doing it?
My interactions on this were directly with my deputy.
Okay. Well, did you know, for example, Ms. Lerner, who's the head of it, got a total of $740,000 between 2009 and 2012, over 40 $2,000 in bonuses. Would you check off on bonuses? And this is the one that used to sit there and was going to testify but didn't. Do you check off
until
on
now,
bonuses?
that number does not sound familiar. I didn't individually make decisions, but I probably signed off on overall agency
And have you
compensation.
participated in the political process? Could you tell the committee of your political participations, donations?
My whole life?
Well, yes. Are you? I don't know your background. I heard you were appointee of one administration, but what is your history of participation?
My full life history of participation in politics, I don't.
The gentleman's time is soon to expire. We could take a short version,
let me not
please.
try to take you
Contributed, for example, to parties and groups?
Have I?
Yeah.
In the past? To the best of my recollection, I have.
You have?
Yeah, I mean, sorry. To the best of my recollection, I have. I haven't in a long time. Didn't make any contributions while I was IRS Commissioner.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Maloney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe we are united in this committee in being outraged at the alleged targeting of Americans for their political beliefs by the IRS. Mr. George, is it illegal to target Americans in the IRS for their political beliefs? Is it illegal activity?
The way in which the Internal Revenue Service exercised their authority in this matter at this stage, Congresswoman, we do not deem it illegal. We do not believe that it was illegal what they did.
Do you believe it should be illegal to target Americans in the IRS for their political beliefs?
Well, the IRS currently has policies which state that if there are willful actions taken that would violate civil rights of a taxpayer, which would in other ways falsify documents, destroy documents, there are illegal activities that the Internal Revenue Service employee can engage in. But I have to note, Congresswoman, that the Secretary has delegated tax policy questions to the Assistant Secretary for Tax Policy, and I have to defer to him.
Well, I personally believe it should be illegal, and I find it very troubling. The allegation that the IRS not only targeted Americans for their political beliefs, but also withheld information from this committee. And specifically, Mr. George, in roughly March of 2012, Chairman Issa and Representative Jordan sent you, or rather Mrs. Lerner, asking for information about the potential targeting of Tea Party organizations by the exempt organization office. Is that true? And that in response to that letter and media reports and requests from this committee that you started an investigation of and reviewing the applications for tax-exempt status. Is that correct?
Actually, it is correct, but we had had conversations with staff of this committee prior to the receipt of that letter.
But you did begin an investigation.
Yes, we did.
And your staff informed Chairman Issa and this committee about that investigation, correct?
That is correct.
Mr. Shulman, in March of 2012, the IRS began conducting its own internal review of the tax-exempt organization division. Is that true? Did that happen? And is that a common occurrence? Why did the IRS start their own internal review when you have an IG whose job it is to do the internal review, and he had notified Congress that he was doing the review?
Look, I don't have a direct recollection of the time frame, but I read the report and saw that in the report in late March, at least in the report, it said that my deputy asked someone to go take a look, and I think that's what you're talking about.
Well, absolutely.
I think my understanding at the time. I'm sorry.
What I'm talking about is you did not inform the committee that you were doing an internal review. Which is the process.
I don't remember it ever being called an internal review. I remember somebody coming to me and saying, hey, people from headquarters are going to go down and talk to the folks in Cincinnati and find out, what's going on.
Okay.
And so I don't, I don't remember it being.
Well, then specifically, the IRS not only chose not to alert Congress in this committee about the internal review or looking into it, whatever you want to call it, but on April 26 of 2012, Ms. Lerner responded to a letter from this committee with her own letter stating that information was gathered from these organizations, and I quote, in the ordinary course of the application process to obtain the information as the IRS deems necessary to make a determination whether the organization meets the legal requirements for tax-exempt status, end quote. And at no point in the letter did Ms. Lerner mention that IRS officials were conducting their own internal review. And Mr. Shulman, why did she omit that fact?
I'm not familiar with that letter. I'm sorry.
And in fact, Ms. Lerner never informed the committee of what was happening in the IRS tax-exempt status in any way. And I just would like to ask you, do you think it's appropriate for the IRS to send such a misleading response back to this committee?
I'd have to look at the whole response, and if it came from Ms. Lerner, it's very unlikely that I knew about it or reviewed it.
Well, I would say that we're all outraged, but it's not too early to start talking about what we can do to fix it. And in your report, Mr. George, you mentioned that it need to be clarified. What is tax exempt? What is not? What is political activity? What is not? What is the status of changing it so that this doesn't happen in the future?
Once again, Congresswoman, that is a tax policy question. I don't know the answer to that, and that would fall within the ambit of the.
You did talk about the complexity about the system, but in no way did you say that this misconduct was the result of a lack of clarity. In other words, targeting these individuals is not because of complexity, but rather something that was inappropriate, whether it was complex or simple.
It's a combination, Mr. Chairman. The determinations unit did have some technical questions, which they submitted along the chain to the appropriate people in Washington. It took over 13 months before they received a response. That was a cause of some of the delay in addressing some of the exempt issues. But I would attribute it mostly to a lack of training, sir, that there was very inadequate training of the people who were handling these applications. And I do fault the IRS for that.
I thank the gentleman.